Hey everyone, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always by Andrew Laird. We are in week 8 of the NFL season. This season is flying by pretty well, kind of the halfway point with week 8. I know that there's 17 weeks, but I'm going to call it the halfway point. Anyway, Andrew, before I jump into going back at week 7 a little bit, I want to talk about that. I just want to see how you are doing today.
I'm fine. You're completely ruling out a potential week 18?
I'm not. That's a good point. We might not even be close to the halfway point. There is, I think we only have one game that's like kind of COVID at risk so far this week. Denver had a positive test on the offensive line. Seems like that game's still going, but yeah, I mean we're in week 8 and we've had all sorts of shuffling already. I think the week 18 is very possible.
The Giants have a few too, don't they? They're just not on this slate, so we don't actually think of them. But I thought the Giants had a few.
Yeah, I think you're right there too. I just kind of I was looking at the main slate and everything else was kind of
right. Who cares about the Giants anyway?
The COVID mind for me. So week 7, I wanted to hit real quick last week. Week 7 was one of the more interesting weeks that I can remember. We had after we did the podcast, both Aaron Jones and Joe Mixon were ruled out. So suddenly, like a lot of salary opened up. Everybody went to Jamal Williams, Gio Bernard. They could pay up for Devonte Adams, and I mean Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf. And one obviously worked a lot better than the other. But people paid up at receiver. They were pay up to Alvin Kamara. I've never seen a week where all the like cheap, must play, free square, chalky guys all did well. And then all the guys people paid up to did well too. Devonte Adams was huge. Lockett was huge. Kamara wasn't huge, but he was really good. Both Williams and Bernard were good. Kyler was good. Russell Wilson was good. Like everybody, like the top 3 to 5 guys at every percentage at every position were really good. I don't think I've ever seen a week like that. I usually play like 2 main GPP lineups, and one of my lineups in DraftKings had 216 points, which was usually like, oh my God, like this is gonna be a big cash week. And it was like kind of a min cash or a little better across the board. It was one of the wilder weeks. I know people say that in the NFL all the time, but it was one of the weirder weeks of like every chalk guy did well.
Yeah, and I made like a colossal error in my own cash lineup, and usually in a week where the chalk all smashes, I should do really well because I tend to play much chalkier lineups, and I just a full mistake on my part, and basically it blasted me. But what was kind of interesting, exactly what you said, like 216 points, like I should score a lot. Right. And it was Jordan Cooper was tweeting about this because there were some people going to him like, I scored all these points, I can't believe I didn't win anymore. And he was like, you have to understand, like the fundamental thing about DFS is not how many points you score just in a vacuum. You don't need, there's no target line. Right. Like everyone's like, well, if I get to this, and in NBA, if you do 5x, 6x, whatever, and it's like all of that is like not important at all. Like all you have to do is score more points than whoever you're playing against, whether it's one person or 500,000 entries. Like the number of points does not matter as long as yours are more than everyone else's. And so, yeah, it's like a bummer when you score like a ton of points and you barely cash, but that's not the game we're playing. So,
yeah, I mean, I think people forget a little bit, like, you not only want your players to do really well, but you need the other players you don't have to not do well.
Right.
Like,
right.
We talked about the week in 2016 when I did really well. I mean, there was like a dead week everywhere else. Like I hit a bunch of really big ones, but like there were a bunch of games that were supposed to go way, supposed to have high points and didn't. There were a couple of weather games. Like getting stuff in other games is almost as important as picking the right players too. You need the guys you fade or don't play just not to do well too.
Right. Exactly. And so like that's when everybody does well. Like just because you did well doesn't mean anything, because it really just matters about how you did versus everyone else. Like this is a peer-to-peer game. Like we have to beat everyone else. Like we all try to be very nice and like help each other, but like really we're trying to beat each other as well. And so that's just like one of the very fundamental things about DFS that people kind of forget, that it's not about scoring the most amount of points that you possibly can. It's just 0.1 more than your opponents.
Yep. I was excited about my Tyler Lockett call, and then I realized that everybody that played Devonte Adams almost got the same game. So it was like you had to have both of them to do really well, which is it was tough. I even had a lineup on FanDuel where I had both of them, but like the rest of the lineup wasn't as good. And you're just like, you hit 2 receivers like that, you hope for a huge score, and it was just one of those weeks. I mean, we get them sometimes. We get some low scoring weeks, we get some high scoring weeks. This is one of the higher ones I can remember. I think the DK Millionaire Maker was like 270 points or something like that. It was an absurd number.
Yeah, it's wild. It is a bummer when like you hit on a receiver so well, and then you hit on multiples, and then you hit on like in the same slate, and you're like, let's go, and then you're like, oh wow.
And it's funny because even watching that Sunday night game, the Sunday night game was Arizona Seattle. even watching Lockett go off, I'm like, well, I know he's going crazy, and it's just not that big because there's so many other guys that they didn't have that went nuts or didn't have the right combo. But it worked out okay. But you hope to get something bigger than that. But let's jump into week 8. I wanted to ask you, first of all, before we jump into specific players, we have some weather issues this week. Obviously, we're recording this Friday midday West Coast time, so we're looking at weather projections. Obviously, those can change, but I think the important part is we're going to talk about all these players in these games, with the caveat that a couple of these games might get a little crazy. But Sunday morning, you got to check the weather. We've got Vikings, Packers, Raiders, Browns, Saints, Bears that all have wind projections over 20 miles an hour. We talk a lot about weather. I don't really care about much unless it is windy because that dramatically affects the passing game. You do see that as an effect. But it's got to be a serious wind. If that drops down to like 12 miles an hour, I just suddenly don't care anymore. Like, I don't care about Aaron Rodgers with 10 miles an hour. But if it's 30 miles an hour, then maybe they run the ball more. Maybe the deep passes kind of go away. So I'm going to walk into this, looking at these players as if we can play them and the wind's not going to be crazy. But with the thought that, the caveat for everybody listening or watching that, if those winds are crazy Sunday morning, I probably adjust away from some of these guys.
Yeah, somebody tweeted today, and I apologize for whoever it was because I don't remember who, but I believe it was the Undertaker gif where he's coming up and he said, like, fantasy players when the game that they want has wind moved from 16 miles an hour to 14 miles an hour because it breaks that 15 barrier right. That we all. Yeah. They're just arbitrary numbers, but I think the most important thing is to just check the game lines. These things are so well set every week, and they move based off of action from people who are much smarter than all of us. And there's probably, it's already built in now. And so if a line is either the same now as it is Sunday, or it's barely moving, as much as you want to say no, I know if when weather happens, but these people know much better than us. And that doesn't mean that just because the line moves doesn't mean that offenses will change, will not change. Sure, there could be the same number of points, but they're running instead of passing. But ultimately, just watch the lines. And if the lines aren't moving, then you thinking it's a humongous deal is counter to what most very, very smart people think.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because we had the Chiefs Broncos game last week that we were worried about snow a little bit. That line dropped total dropped from 49 to 44.5. Yeah. So and that's, when you get something that drops 4.5 points, that is a sizable drop, and obviously people are pounding the under on that and making the line move. So it's a good point. I think that looking at lines, the totals more than anything, I think in these games is, we've already seen the Vikings and Packers was 52.5 to start the week. It's 50.5 right now. So you're right, it's priced in. But if that drops to 44 on Sunday morning, there's probably people locally that kind of know what's going on and are relaying the information. I think that's a really good point to check totals with these games before you decide whether to take guys in or out.
Yeah, and you just have to figure out what is a sizable move. 52 to 50 is marginal, but 52 to 46, that's a decent move. And then you just have to compare it to the other games on the slate anyway, because we're not playing these games in vacuums. So if you have a game that was the highest total and now it's the 5th highest, now you can look at the other games a little bit, but you still have to compare everything to each other.
Yeah, that's true too. So let's jump into these. We have some high over unders, but like I've said, some of them have moved. We've got 5 games that were over 50 a couple days ago. The Raiders and Browns, as I mentioned earlier, has dropped below 50. It's now 49. That was 52.5 a couple days ago. Niners in Seattle, obviously that's not in the Midwest, so that one hasn't been affected. 53.5 on that one. A combination of Russell Wilson being awesome and the Seahawks defense being absolutely horrific. Titans Bengals is 51.5. Colts Lions indoors in the Midwest, so that helps a lot. That's 50. And then Vikings Packers, mentioned a second ago, has gone from 52.5 to 50.5. I really liked Browns Raiders as a game to kind of target and go over. Now I'm a little wary with the weather, but I thought that was a game where Baker played really well in the second half last week. Derek Carr has been better than he has been in recent years. That was a game I was looking at, and now I'm a little more wary of that one. I'll have to admit, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that could be a sneaky big one. Obviously the Browns are going to be without one of their best offensive players, 2 if you count Nick Chubb, but I was specifically referring to Beckham. But
right.
Yeah, we've seen both teams put up points, so it's not like it would be crazy if all of a sudden that game got a little out of hand. The Tennessee-Cincinnati one, I can't totally get a read on because I feel like Tennessee is really good, particularly defensively, and yet they find themselves giving up a ton of points, and so I don't know how to read that game yet.
And the Bengals love their second half garbage time production too. I mean,
right.
They will absolutely abandon the run really quickly too. So that's a game that could go. I think Colts and Lions feels to me like a little bit low. I like the indoors. I think the Colts defense has been really good, but I think those teams will score a little bit. I would take that's one that I think sneaks over the 50 points.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
There are 3 games we have this week that are actually under 46. So we've got we haven't had many of those recently. We've got Rams Dolphins is 45.5. Tua making his debut in that game. Chargers Broncos is 44.5. Saints Bears, another one that's possibly in the wind, is 43. Crazy in that game. The Saints have been over in every game they've played, and the Bears have been averaging under 40 total points their game. So talk about rubber meets the road right there. You've got one team that's been every game's over, one team that's almost every game has been under. So it'll be interesting there. And then Patriots Bills right now is 40. Cam Newton coming off one of the worst games I've ever watched a quarterback play against the 49ers, to the point that like I'm one that like doesn't like to jinx things. I'm like, I don't want to say anything bad about the other team in the middle of the game. In the third quarter, I was tweeting out like, I've never seen a quarterback play as badly as Cam played. I mean, he was back to like that weird, like him throwing with his whole body instead of his arm, which you saw 2 years ago before he had the surgery. His arm didn't look right. He was short hopping guys like 10-yard outs that were wide open. You don't see that in the NFL. Every once in a while, Bridgewater does it too. Did a couple times last night, and then he overthrew a guy that was like wide open. Then he wasn't really running. I don't know if it was a COVID hangover or what's going on with Cam, but that over under of 40, that jumps off. We don't see many of those in this season.
You haven't watched enough Joe Flacco, Scott.
Yeah, that is definitely by choice. And the fact that the 49ers lost to him in the Super Bowl still bugs the crap.
I bet. We also
it's like one 3-game stretch where he actually was elite. His whole career happened to be in that exact time period.
Yeah. It's the Eli Manning story.
Exactly.
You also forgot that they have no receivers.
It doesn't. They really don't. And Edelman might not play this week too. And they really it's barren. They don't have anybody. But he was missing guys that like were open. It was really rough to watch. It was they obviously took him out. And they went to Jared Stidham like in the middle of the third quarter, or start of the fourth quarter. But he's back starting. I want no part of that offense, just so we're clear, before we even get to positions. There's not even a player on that team I'm considering.
You will find zero Patriot sympathy over here, Scott.
I imagine you're mildly enjoying the level of the pain.
If there's anything better than a Jets win, it's a Patriots loss, and I'm not getting any Jets wins these days. So.
No, unfortunately not. Even guys are even getting COVID to avoid being drafted by the Jets.
I might get COVID just to stop having to watch the Jets.
But then you're in quarantine and you got nothing to do but watch TV. So that's tough. So let's jump into running backs. We have some familiar names at the top. I'm obviously tossing Aaron Jones off because he has been ruled out as of about 20 minutes ago. We've got Alvin Kamara, 8,200 on DraftKings, Derrick Henry, 8,000, Dalvin Cook at 7,500. What are you feeling at the top of the running back board this week?
I was basically trying to figure out if I was willing to trust Dalvin Cook, which is weird because I'm not usually a Dalvin Cook guy. Derrick Henry jumped out at me at first, but the salary savings helps a little bit with Cook, and obviously he gets involved in the passing game. But a gimpy Dalvin Cook, knowing that they have, why am I blanking on his backup?
Alexander Madison?
Madison, thank you. I played him once, and now I just take him out of my pool completely.
The crazy thing is we played him at almost the same price that Cook is right now. Which is just, it's wild how much he got priced up.
Right. Like I said, he's gone. So, but I think I'm not going to play Kamara. Jerry Donabedian wrote this week actually in his DraftKings tournament guide that he thinks Kamara's in the smash spot, which is wild to me because of the potential weather in Chicago, and not to mention the Chicago defense. But Jerry's smart. He's definitely smarter than me, but I can't go there this week. So I think I'll probably, if I can get comfortable with the idea that Cook is healthy enough, I think I like Cook the most in this group. Yeah,
they did take Cook fully off the injury report this morning, which is a good sign that he's cleared. He's cleared and good to go. He partially practiced Thursday, and he's not even on the injury report as of Friday. So I would like to think that they wouldn't risk him if he was a little bit gimpy, but you just never know. He was okay week 1 against Green Bay. This is a matchup that already happened earlier in the year. He was 12 for 50, scored 2 touchdowns, but obviously Green Bay got way up in that game. Minnesota came back a little bit in the fourth quarter, but that score was not indicative of how much of a domination that was. So he was kind of game scripted out in that first game. Scored every game he's played in so far. Cook 7 touchdowns in 5 games. I love Dalvin Cook at any point. I think he's a really nice play this week at 7,500. I would play him over Kamara myself too. Henry's the interesting one to me because he had 2 weeks ago he had that monster game, 20 plus touches in every game. He's a guy that the volume is always there. Pittsburgh held him pretty well last week, 20 carries for 75 yards and a touchdown. But the Bengals are allowing 5.1 yards per carry. I think that you got to think Tennessee gets up in this game. I like Tannehill, too, at the price, actually. So you got to figure out kind of what – if I want to play the run game or the pass game for Tennessee. Good game script, 6-point favorites by Tennessee. I think this is a week that you could put Derrick Henry in and be pretty sure that, A, the volume's going to be there, and I think the efficiency would be better than it normally is.
I felt the same way about Henry in terms of Tannehill. Like, I kind of liked Tannehill, and I don't know if I liked Tannehill because he's cheap, and we'll obviously get to quarterbacks in a little bit, but, like, I can't decide if, like, feeling that he's a little underpriced makes me like him more or makes me think he's actually the better play than Henry if I want exposure to the Titans. I will say that the Vikings updated their injury report, and Cook is questionable.
They updated since, like, this morning?
Yes.
So he was cleared this morning.
He was cleared this morning, and they have since added him, and he is questionable.
That does not make me feel great about that. You think they just missed him on the first one?
Maybe.
It must be. They must just not missed him, and they thought he took him off, but he's still questionable. So that's
it sounds like all the beat writers think he's going to play, but playing fully is what makes you have to worry about something.
Yeah, that's definitely a Sunday morning kind of see if they say anything, if he looks gimpy in warmups or whatever it may be. But let's drop down a little bit in price. I think there's a lot of interesting guys in the 6,000 range. You and I have talked extensively about Kareem Hunt the last few weeks. And I feel like last week he got it done. He was 18 for 76, had a touchdown receiving, but he hasn't really fully blown up. Like I expected a lot with Nick Chubb out, and he's just kind of been lingering in the good range rather than the great range. But another matchup that I do like again this week, they're home against the Raiders. Could be some wins, so maybe they rely on the run game more. Odell Beckham's out, so maybe they rely on the one game more there too. But he's been getting 20 touches a game. If you're going to give me Hunt at 20 touches a game, I think I'm going to keep taking him, even though he hasn't really blown up. Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones were okay against the Raiders last week, 24 for 84 and a touchdown. New England was big against them earlier. Kamara was big against them earlier. So they have given some big games. Las Vegas has. I think I'm back to Kareem Hunt. I thought last week maybe was the last time I'd have to fully jump in, but I think I'm back again.
Hunt was actually where I went before Cook for my own lineup when I was building it, just because it was a little cheaper. I liked the matchup a lot. Yeah. It feels like such a classic Hunt situation that he did have a good game last week, and any other week that would have been good, but because last week there were thousands of points, like it just he didn't do enough.
Yeah, playing him was kind of he's essentially probably if you played the two cheap guys, you played Kamara instead of him, and Kamara's better than Hunt, but. I think it's a really good spot. I love the volume. I love the matchup. I like the game. I think this game will get a little high scoring, especially if the wind is not huge. I think under 7,000 is still a good price. He's 8,200 on FanDuel, so I'm less likely to play him there. He's a little bit closer. I guess the FanDuel, the Kamara, Hunt, Henry Cook guys are over 9,000 there. So, but he's 8,200 on FanDuel. I think I'm away there, but on DraftKings I think I'm a full go, especially with the full point PPR.
Yeah, I like it, and I will probably like it more if we get the Cook maybe on like a snap count or whatever Sunday morning. There's nothing more I like to do on Sunday mornings than refreshing Minnesota Vikings beat writer Twitter accounts. But
and the snap count, the pitch counts never turn out to be total BS either.
Oh yeah, just garbage.
Yeah.
Or we get him from I'll never Jordan Reed of getting 12 targets on 15 snaps. I just
he would have 2 touchdowns in the first 6 plays. So that was dropping down a little bit. I think this is the first week in a while that I'm actually interested in Jonathan Taylor with the Colts. They're at Detroit. Taylor's 6,600 on DraftKings, 7,300 on FanDuel. The snap percentage has been up the last couple of games. The snap count has not been. They had less plays, so it kind of worked out. But he's been playing a little bit more snaps. Not fully where we want it yet. He still only has 12 carries the past 2 weeks, but they've been good. Like he was 12 for 57 and 12 for 60. He has 7 targets the last couple of weeks. At some point, they have to really take the reins off Taylor. It's going to be hard to time. It's going to happen one of these weeks. I like this game indoors. I think it's a game that could get high on the points to it. I mentioned earlier, I like the over 50 in this game. Detroit was good against Todd Gurley last week. He did score twice, once on purpose, once on accident. But Detroit was thrashed earlier by New Orleans and by Aaron Jones. They've given up a lot in the run game. I think I'm going to go back to Taylor this week for the first time in a while.
I just feel like there are enough other guys I can play where I don't have to do that. At least in like a cash lineup where you try to minimize the hopeful plays as opposed to what you're more confident about. But yeah, I mean, it makes a ton of sense. Or favored in a indoor game on a slate that might not have huge number of points like we had last week. So yeah, he makes sense. And I mean, the guy right below him on DraftKings, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, if you for a 19.5 point favorite,
right.
Usually you want the running game, and you just have to consider how much the revenge factor from Le'Veon Bell fits into this. As truly ridiculous as that sounds, people, I think, are jokingly like talking about it, but are seriously trying to get thoughts on it.
Yeah, we have two of those this week, and we'll get to the second one here in just a second, the running backs. But CEH is weird because they had a big lead last week, but they built the Chiefs game was wacky last week. They did build a big lead on a special teams touchdown and a defensive touchdown. So like you look up and the Chiefs have 21 points, you're like awesome, and you look at Mahomes and CEH, you're like, oh my god.
Yeah.
He only had 9 touches. He only played 27 snaps last week. So I mean, Le'Veon for his first game actually, Bell had 6 touches, so not a ton, but like took some work away, took some snaps away. They may have gone away from CEH with a big lead too, just to not put some wear and tear on him. It's a great game script. It's 6,500. I don't think I could do it over the guys in this range.
Do you think it's just because of the lack of? I mean, it's got to be the lack of volume. Like the matchup itself is great.
The matchup is phenomenal. You'd love it. But I think with Bell there, I think there's enough that you look at they kind of split series a bunch last week, and you got to think if anything, Bell gets more work. Like first game, you got to think it's the least amount of work Bell will get. So I think it gets too much to be a timeshare to me. I think that. You got to think Bell's been in coach's ears this week. He wants to score a couple times or at least do well and be out there. It's not that he just left the Jets. Like he had a bad time with the Jets. Like I think it's safe to say he doesn't like Adam Gase and Adam Gase doesn't like him. And he is more of a like playing my old team than actually like disliking my old team here, which may play in a little bit.
I from my completely unbiased opinion, I actually think he doesn't hate the team. Like he was amazingly professional for the garbage situation he got himself into for $40 million. Like I think he might hate Adam.
Tough garbage situation.
Yeah. I think he might hate Adam Gase, which is reasonable. But
you hate Adam Gase. You hate Adam Gase too, so you guys are on the same page.
Right? Exactly. But so yeah, I don't. I think the narrative is stupid enough that it'll get me not to play CEH in a game where the Chiefs are almost 3 touchdown favorites.
And
I also think they cover, by the way.
Oh, you think they cover? Wow. Yeah, that's it's hard to like the Jets finally covered last week for the first time. And hey, Jets didn't give up a touchdown last week. I'm trying.
It's
before I get into last week's heroes, which are priced up, I want to ask you about a couple of guys in this range. James Conner's at Baltimore. He was like the most frustrating player of all last week. I loved him last week. He had a touchdown called back, and he dropped a touchdown pass all in the first quarter. I was like, this is going to be a huge game. And then he was just okay, and the fact that everybody else went crazy, like he ended up being a bad play. Should have scored twice in the first quarter and didn't. It was really frustrating. But he's 6,400. Josh Jacobs is 6,200, kind of a guy that we liked at the start of the year and was doing really well. Either of those guys in play for you this week, I kind of have neither of them really circled or in bold on my sheet.
Yeah, I generally don't play guys against Baltimore. It just seems like there's always a reason. Like that's enough of a reason, but even if it's not, there are other guys that I can play that make me feel better about it. And Jacobs, I just worry about game script. The game theoretically could be very high scoring and close, but if the Raiders fall behind, he generally isn't producing nearly enough.
Yeah, and the Browns are really good against the run, 3.7 yards per carry. And Jacobs has 5 touchdowns, but they've come in 2 games. So he's had like 2 good games and 4 really bad games. Like he's just like really 4 games. Yeah. Last week was terrible. He was 10 for 17 last week. Like I realized they got down quick to Tampa, but he wasn't involved at all. And with Baltimore, you mentioned not playing some. I mean, they've allowed one guy over 75 yards. It's Miles Sanders, but he had an 80-yard run in that game. So I think he kind of, obviously that counts and it matters, but you kind of have to throw that one out as kind of a fluky, long play. Miles Sanders could do that to anybody, but they've been really good against running backs all year. And I'm not going Connor or Jacobs this week.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So last week's heroes I mentioned are priced up. We got Jamal Williams. We have Gio Bernard. Bernard's 5,800 this week. Jamal Williams is 6,100. Looks like Mixon's not going to play. Aaron Jones has been ruled out. Are you going back to either of them at the big price bumps this week?
Mixon has also been ruled out. So
he's been ruled out. Okay, good. Good for Gio, not good for him.
Right. I mean, they're both dirt cheap. Like, I actually think it doesn't match up perfectly, but you can almost play the exact same lineup this week as you did last week and be okay.
Even with the price bump, I mean, they were 4,000 to 4,500. They're not up enough for you to move away.
I mean, Jamal Williams had 19 carries.
I like Williams a lot more than Bernard.
5 targets. Yeah, I think. I mean, the Bernard thing, and it kind of played out like last week. Like, he rushed 13 times for 37 yards. And like, that's what I kind of, what we all should have expected, which is the fact that he had 5 for 59 and a touchdown after that. Like, he wasn't great, but that is more than enough.
Late receiving touchdown really just stuck a knife into people.
Yeah. I mean, I think Williams is certainly far better than Bernard.
Okay.
But just in terms of salary, he's still pretty underpriced for the situation.
Yeah, I like Williams a good amount this week at 6,100. He was 19 for 77. You mentioned the 19 carries. He had a touchdown. He also had 4 catches. Minnesota shut down Gurley last start. That was 2 weeks ago because Minnesota was on a bye. And week 1, Green Bay ran okay against them. But, Aaron Jones was 16 to 66 for and a touchdown. But at the price in this offense, I just think that Jamal Williams is so involved. He was clearly the guy over A.J. Dillon last week. People were a little bit worried about Dillon. It wasn't even close. Snap counts and touches and all that. So it was Jamal Williams. My question for you with these guys is, you drop down a little bit, and if Phillip Lindsay does not play, how do you think about Melvin Gordon at 5,600 on DraftKings, 6,700 on FanDuel?
I think he makes sense. Certainly. I mean, like, matchup's not one you necessarily have to avoid. That Denver passing attack is kind of a situation where you want the running back because you assume that they're going to try to do as much as they can. You just have to worry that the Chargers get ahead and then Gordon kind of falls out. Like, he'll get a few targets here and there, but he's not going to stay on the field for everything. And so that's my only fear of that game.
Yeah, I mean, he was obviously the other revenge guy that I was bringing up. He was playing against his old team and didn't leave on the best of terms. No. But I don't buy into revenge narrative. We joked around with Bell. I don't really buy into that a ton. I like him if Lindsay doesn't play. I think that he'll get a lot of work if Lindsay doesn't play. Tim Patrick's not going to play either, probably. Yeah. So they need to find guys. He did have 4 targets last week in a game that they were trailing against Kansas City. I think they'll use him a little bit there. I prefer him over Bernard for sure. I don't know what I do with him and Jamal Williams, but I go Gordon over Bernard for sure this week for a little bit cheaper.
I mean, I kept saying last week that I didn't want to play Bernard because I just don't think he's that good. And so if I can have somebody else, then maybe he
wasn't that good. He scored, had 5 catches, and kind of at the price, he was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was enough. And so, but yeah, I think Gordon's definitely in play in this price range. Definitely.
I am one who never drafts Melvin Gordon, never plays Melvin Gordon. It's the first week all year where I really thought he was a pretty good play.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish the Chargers, I mean, we had the same problem last year, but I wish the Chargers backfield was a little clearer because those guys are pretty cheap too. I mean, they're right under Gordon anyway. Yeah,
so I have those guys, but it's second real quick in the low 5,000s. Myles Gaskin and Deandre Swift. Any interest in either of those guys this week? 5,200 and 5,300 respectively.
No.
I like Gaskin normally. I just don't want to do it against the Rams defense. Right. He has 20-plus touches last week. Since Jordan Howard's been inactive, he's really been the guy around goal line. I just think with a rookie quarterback, I like running quarterbacks as running backs. I just don't know what to expect from Tua. And against the Rams D, I just think I'm not going to go there this week.
It's a tough debut game.
It is. It really is. I mean, I know they wanted to debut Tua after the bye, but yeah, Rams, Aaron Donald coming after you is not something you really want to, not a way to ease yourself into the NFL.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure we've seen enough from Swift to be confident that he's the guy. Yeah.
And he's really good, but still 13 touches last week. And Adrian Peterson had 12 touches. So it's not like there's not a clear demarcation that it's finally Swift's job. He only played 28 snaps. The Colts have been really good against the run, 3.5 yards per carry. I just I can't go there right now until they kind of that 50-50 or 60-40 becomes more of like a 75-25 kind of thing.
Yeah, you'd be all over Gordon before you'd play Swift.
For sure for me. And I'd play Gordon over Gaskin too.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Chargers guys. Justin Jackson's 4,800. Joshua Kelly's 4,900. Kelly out-snapped Jackson last week with his 38-31, so it's close enough where you're like, either guy could do something. Kelly was better. Jackson, he was 12 for 29. Jackson was 5 for 12. Jackson was better receiving. They both had 5 catches, but Jackson 43 yards. I just think it's a little bit too much of a timeshare right now. They're cheap enough where you want to throw them in a GPP lineup and kind of hit the right guy at the right time. I have no problem with that, but trying to pick which one, I think anybody that tells you they know what's going to happen between these guys is just kind of guessing at this point.
Yeah, and because of that, I'm out.
Right under them is the guy we mentioned earlier, Le'Veon Bell at 4,600. He played 17 snaps last week, 6 for 39. Obviously, the revenge game, good game script. They're 19.5-point favorites on your Jets. Any consideration of playing him at the super cheap 4,600?
I mean, I'd probably play him in GPP for sure. There are enough low entry tournaments that you can burn $1 and hopefully win $80,000 or whatever. So
I don't think he's going to play, have 22 carries by any means, but he could certainly score a couple times, especially in the second half if they want to really work him in. I can see it working. He's one of those guys that has a decent ceiling. I wouldn't say hugely, but has a decent ceiling, but a really low floor. Like he could play.
Oh yeah.
He could be 8 for 40 and 1 catch pretty easily and not score. And you're like, oh, it's that doesn't seem that crazy. And if they get up 35 on the Jets, they're not going to risk anybody at that point. You're going to see whoever it is, Darrell Williams, or I don't even know who they have behind him at this point. I see it at GPP. I might throw one lineup in with it, but I'm not heavy on that. I know a lot of people love Bell this week, and I'm not one that loves him. I'm just okay, and I could see it working out, but not something that I think is going to happen.
I think if you could make a reasonable argument other than revenge, then it makes sense. But you're effectively choosing the backup running back on a team that's a 19.5-point favorite, which that can work. That can work. That could be the.
And at some point, you have to hope that you have to want Andy Reid to buy in that revenge too. It's not just Le'Veon Bell being, I hate this team, I'm going to go in. I mean, Reed's got to use him with a lead and call plays for him. So it's not just Bell hating Gaze. It's like Reed has to buy in it too. And he might be like, you know what, Le'Veon, go get yours. But, he's been there for 2 weeks. I don't think there's any strong loyalty there he means. But, I think he scores probably once and has 40 or 50 yards. And, that's something that, is not going to kill you. But you probably need the touchdown for it to work.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like his floor is 8 for 40 and his ceiling is 8 for 40 and 2 touchdowns.
I think that's a really good way to put it. Maybe 3 catches and something like that. So that's why I said I think the ceiling's decent, not huge, because I don't think he'll get enough work to be huge. But a backup running back, like you said, in a game that's as big a total or biggest spread as we see in the NFL, can certainly work.
All I want to see is him score and just run over and give the ball to Adam Gase.
And Gaze will have just eyes popping out of his head the whole time.
And he'll just have his arms folded. The ball will hit him in the chest because he doesn't want to. I mean, whatever.
Last situation I want to talk about before we move to the passing game, the Seahawks against the 49ers. It sounds like Carlos Hyde's not going to play if I can kind of read the Pete Carroll quotes this morning, but Chris Carson is now a game-time decision. I thought he was going to be out. He's a game-time decision. They say Travis Homer's probably going to play. So say the problem is it's an afternoon game, so we may not get anything for sure, which makes it really tough, especially with guys this cheap. It's because it's hard to late swap out of these guys. If you I guess you could go to maybe one of the Chargers guys because they're a late game also. But DJ Dallas is 4,000, Travis Homer's 4,000. Say we find out on Saturday that both Hyde and Carson are out. Are you going to delve into the situation at all?
I mean, delving is just playing Homer, right? Nobody's actually playing Dallas.
Oh, if all 3 are out, but it sounds like Homer's going to play. I guess
right.
If all 3 are out, you go DJ Dallas because there's nobody else there. I just think if all these guys are out, I just think they're going to let Wilson throw the ball the whole game anyway.
Yeah, I would definitely consider Homer.
Yeah. Yeah, but 4,000 is min price, dirt cheap. I think that I think Hyde and Carson have to be ruled out for me to do it.
Yeah, totally out. Yeah, because like you said, I mean, theoretically you could build the salary around Gordon, and then, I mean, you'll have to tinker somewhere, maybe play a late defense from one of those 3 games, but
right.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to find out early enough.
Yeah, sorry. We're taping this a little bit later, so you're going to get some phone calls in there. I apologize for that. So let's jump into the passing game. It's an interesting week this week passing-wise. I'm going to start at the top and ask you about Patrick Mahomes first. We've mentioned this game a bunch of times with the game script and 19.5-point favorites. I'm not paying up for Mahomes this week. I fully get that he could throw 4 touchdowns in the first half, and they're way up, and he could dominate. He's not thrown more than 2 touchdowns since week 3. The defenses have clearly been kind of trying to make them run the ball. We talked about that a little bit last week. I think there's enough other guys that I really like and want to play that I fully get that Mahomes could go off on the Jets. It's a great matchup, but I just think the second half could be pretty ugly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have to think about him because he's Patrick Mahomes, but yeah, I didn't go that deep on him just because I fully expect them to kill the Jets, and it could be Le'Veon Bell's 2 first quarter touchdowns that I mean they don't have to throw anymore. Like I think there are a lot of quarterbacks you can play this week.
I do too, and I've got guys at the top I like, I've got guys in the middle I like, and I got guys at the bottom I like, which is pretty rare. I usually don't get that many guys in each tier. Let's talk about not the top tier with Mahomes, but the kind of secondary next tier here. We got Russell Wilson at 7,800, Aaron Rodgers 7,600. Those are both on DraftKings. Lamar Jackson 7,400. I know you're not playing Lamar Jackson this week. Josh Allen at 7,000 against New England in a really low total game. Wilson and Rodgers clearly stick out in this group for me, but where are you thinking this range?
I think that's exactly right. I think it's those two. I kind of sided with Rodgers a little bit, although you keep telling me how awful the San Francisco secondary is because of all the injuries. So maybe
they're getting a little bit healthier, but they're still pretty bad.
Yeah. But I think either of them are perfectly fine. Like, I don't think there's necessarily one thing that makes one so much better than the other. I think based off of last week, what we saw without Aaron Jones, that Rodgers was perfectly willing to just throw every single ball he could to Devonte Adams. And the benefit of Devonte Adams is that he catches everything that you throw to him. And so, I mean, 283 and 4 touchdowns if you don't have, or you're not going to have Aaron Jones again. So maybe that's the slight thing that I like a little more. Obviously, the absence of Chris Carson or Carlos Hyde doesn't exactly move the needle as much for me.
Yeah, and Rodgers, obviously mentioned, was really good against them week 1, 364 and 4 touchdowns. I guess the weather on that game might impact a little bit, but we'll have to check that Sunday morning. I love Russell Wilson this week. I'm going to go Wilson over Rodgers. 3 touchdowns in 5 of 6 games. The Niners have all kinds of issues with running quarterbacks. And with those injuries, Wilson's running the ball a little bit more. He has 58, 84 rushing yards the last 2 games. The Niners cannot stop quarterbacks running the ball, so I expect a good chunk to kind of build the floor there. The Niners are still banged up in the secondary, getting a little healthier. Jason Verrett's playing really well. Emmanuel Mosley's back. I'm not sure if K'Wan Williams is going to play. Richard Sherman's not going to. Both safeties are questionable, but I think that they have a pretty good chance to play this week. I just think that Wilson against them in a game that I think the Niners are going to score 2. I think Wilson's going to be huge. I think you get some rushing yards. You may get a rushing touchdown. You get 3 passing touchdowns. Wilson Metcalf stack is my favorite stack of the week by leaps and bounds. I love it this week. I don't think the Niners have anybody that they can use to guard DK Metcalf. I think that's the time the way you beat them is deep balls on the corners on the outside. Whereas last week I liked Lockett more in that situation. I just don't think they're going to be guard Metcalf. I love Russell Wilson losing in any week, any lineup I'm paying up at quarterback. It's going to be for Wilson.
I mean, I don't think you can really go wrong. So. Jerry in his tournament guide put them as that game passing game stacks. That's the first one right there, and it's Wilson, Lockett, Metcalf.
Yeah, and I think that it will take the 49ers scoring some, but I think they can. Seattle's defense is just so terrible right now. I mean, they give up tons of points and yards to everybody. The Niners aren't explosive. They like to kind of grind it out, but I think they'll have to open it up a little bit to stick with Seattle. I think this is a game that could fly up in points, and I just think. And if Carson and Hyde don't play, I like it even more. I just think that they'll just kind of forget the run game a little bit, which they never do in Seattle, but I think they will do it this week and let Russell kind of do his thing. And I think they've learned in 49ers games in the past, they've kind of been quiet with Wilson early, and then he exploded. The game last year where they were way up, and he went nuts in the fourth quarter. And I just think I think it's gonna be Wilson all the time. I love him this week.
That's fair. Would you love him enough to play him as your quarterback? Do you love him more than the values that you have at every other price tier?
I think so. It will depend on lineup builds, obviously. It might depend on some injuries and if we get some cheaper guys in here. But, yeah, my main – I usually play one main lineup, and I think it's going to be a Wilson lineup.
Okay. That's fair.
In the 6,000s, we have a couple of really interesting guys. We have Justin Herbert at 6,900 against Denver. Has been just great lately. And then we have Ryan Tannehill. You kind of hit on a little bit, 6,800 at Cincy. Seems like you like Tannehill more than Herbert this week if I'm getting it from the head shake that you just gave me.
No, the head shake was just every young quarterback I see that succeeds just makes me grind not seeing Sam Darnold in this group. That's all.
Yeah, it definitely hurts. So we have Herbert doing really well. Burrow's playing really well, and Tua this week will be interesting. But if you have to pick between Herbert and Tannehill, what are you doing this week?
I think I go Tannehill. I thought Tannehill was like a little cheap, but like that's 6,800 is really not that cheap. It's just like that we have a lot of guys in front of him.
Yeah.
But I think I side with him just a little bit more. That playing in Denver is always like a little tougher for some people. Their secondary is not nearly as good as it has been in the past, but I think they're still good enough that like I think Tannehill is at least safer against Cincinnati. Yeah,
and Tannehill's obviously been really good. He only had 220 yards against the Steelers last week, but that's the Steelers. Right. He did have 2 touchdowns. He was 366 and 4 touchdowns against Houston the week before that. The Bengals just allowed a lot. I mean, Baker Mayfield just smoked them last week, and it's Baker Mayfield. And he was 0 for 5 and then completed like 21 passes in a row and set a Browns record. It was crazy. 297 and 5. He was Phillip Rivers of all people was 2 weeks ago was 371 and 3. Yeah. So like they've been getting big games to not very good quarterbacks right now. The Bengals just get no pressure. They traded Carlos Dunlap this week, so he's obviously not going to be pressuring Tannehill. Tannehill's much better when he has a clean pocket, and I think he'll have that a lot this week. I just think he builds in really nicely. The only concern is that they get up in this game and just hand the ball off 40 times in the second half. But yeah, I think I go Tannehill a little bit over Herbert. I love Herbert, and he's had 11 touchdowns the last 3 weeks, and 2 of those were against the Bucs and Saints. So he's like not beating up bad defenses too. He passes every possible eye test right now.
It's funny you say you're worried about Tannehill that they get up and then they run 40 times in the second half, but like they could get up because of the running 40 times in the first half and then they run 40 times. It's
possible too. Yeah. With Tennessee, that's always something that could happen.
Yeah, so he's a little cheaper, but what do you think about the other side of that game with Joe Burrow?
Yeah, I mean, he leads the NFL in dropbacks per game. They are letting him chuck it in every way possible. Nice game script, 6-point dogs. He had 400 yards last week, kind of chasing Cleveland around. That Cleveland-Cincinnati game was wild. It was the first game in NFL history with 5 lead-changing touchdown passes in the fourth quarter. It's the first time it's ever happened. He had 3 touchdowns last week. He only had 1 the prior 3 weeks, so he kind of broke out a little bit last week. Ben was pretty good against Tennessee last week. Deshaun Watson was really good the week before that. I think the game script works out really nicely. I just think I'd probably go Tannehill over him. I think Tannehill's a little safer. And there's 2 guys down to 5,000, so I'm thinking about playing too. So it's I like Burrow, but I think there's just other guys above and below him that I prefer this week.
The volume is just nuts. Like
it's crazy. It really is.
Like just his passing attempts, like 36, 61, 44, 36, 30, 39, and 47 last week. I mean, he was 35 of 47. Like that, that's crazy.
And with no Mixon in there, like I think with Gio's a guy they more like to use out of the backfield, and they're not going to hand it to him 24 times. Like even with Mixon, like they forced him sometimes, even when they're losing. You're not going to see that with Gio, and it lines up really well. I have no issue with anybody that plays Burrow this week and kind of going for that. Stack it up in the second half again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Is Jimmy G one of your 5K guys?
He is. So I have 2 guys in the mid 5Ks I think are playable this week, which is usually does not happen. It kind of depends how you build your lineup. Jimmy G is the first one. Missing Deebo Samuel hurts. Like he's one of those guys that can catch the ball and run, but he has Brennan Ayuk, who was really good last week. Got George Kittle, obviously. Seattle hasn't stopped anybody all year. They're allowing 374 passing yards per game to quarterbacks. It's a wild number for a team that like at least like even 4 years ago was like Legion of Boom and like nobody passed on them. It's wild how much that's changed.
The Jamal Adams trade really worked.
Yeah, I mean he's been hurt, so it may depends if he plays or not. I think that maybe affects Kittle more than anything else if Jamal Adams plays. Jimmy G's has stats haven't been huge, but he's been really efficient and effective since the Miami debacle. He's been pretty good against the Rams and last week against whoever they played. Who'd they beat last week?
New England.
I'm totally blanking on that game. It was so bad. But the other guy is Derek Carr at 5,500. Quietly been really good this year. I'm not someone that's never liked Derek Carr, but 8.2 YPA so far this year. He has multiple passing TDs in 5 straight games. And if the wind dies down this game, I think it's a game that could really get back and forth, kind of like Cleveland and Cincinnati was last week. Dak Prescott had 502 and 4 against Cleveland a couple weeks ago. I think he has a chance to be a sneaky back and forth game. I think if I'm going down here, I'm actually going Carr before Jimmy.
Wow.
That is assuming not 70-mile-an-hour winds, of course.
Yeah, of course. I think that's fun. Like, I don't want to call Derek Carr fun. Let me not go that crazy. But, yeah, I mean, like you said, that game could get out of hand. And if it does, he's going to play a part in it. And if you don't really love Josh Jacobs and you think a game is going to get out of hand, then obviously you have to go to Carr.
And Henry Ruggs is healthy, and Aguilar's been playing well. Darren Waller's a good option. Like, he doesn't have great weapons, but like good enough weapons that if it does get back and forth, he can pass the ball. And they're throwing the ball deep, which they didn't used to in the past. And obviously that's another win thing there. But they talked this week about how they like to go deep now, and they've really changed their approach there. So if I'm going to save money and kind of build a lineup and try and get some expensive receivers and stuff, Carr be the way that I would do that, like a $2,000 savings from the Rodgers Wilson price.
I'm surprised that you like him more than Jimmy G.
I just think if I had to get in the mind of Kyle Shanahan, it's to run the ball and kind of not get in a back and forth with Russell Wilson. So I think if they can run it, they will. They will go play action, and Jimmy will make some plays. So I think that could work, but I think the game plan, at least in the first half, is going to be to kind of limit Russell Wilson's possessions if they can.
That's fair. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that is always the fear with Garoppolo, is that like they really don't want to have to rely on him to throw.
Jeff Wilson Jr. scores 3 times. Yeah. That obviously can't happen this week. I'm just referring to last week.
Sure,
but it could be Hasty, could be McKinnon, could be
could be
Tevin
anyone but Jimmy G. Yeah.
They might bring back Roger Craig for 3 touchdowns. I'm not totally sure. But I wouldn't bet on anyone. Like, if I were doing player props, I wouldn't bet anything in the Niners backfield. We didn't talk about them. There's no way until Raheem Mostert comes back, I'm not playing anybody in that backfield because they're all usable. If you know what's going to happen, you know volume. There's no way for us to know. I mean, Jerick McKinnon got a rest game last week that we didn't even know about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And apparently has tired legs now, even though he hasn't been doing anything. It's great. Let's jump into wide receivers. Devonte Adams is way at the top. He's 8,800 on DraftKings. Obviously a massive game last week, 13 for 196, 2 touchdowns. He's played 3 full games. He has double-digit targets in each one. He went bonkers against Minnesota the first week. He was 14 for 156 and 2. Like, those lines just sound crazy. Like, it's like a video game. But Minnesota's not stopping anybody. Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley had 198 yards combined against them and 3 touchdowns in week 6. Metcalf went crazy in week 5. I don't think I can pay up for Devonte Adams at 8,800, but I guess I wouldn't fault anybody who did if they wanted to build a lineup that way.
It's just so stark to see the next highest is Metcalf at 7,500 on DraftKings.
It's such a big difference. It's wild.
But it kind of feels just like Michael Thomas last year. And
yeah, it does.
I mean, we were playing Michael Thomas at like 9,900, like especially on non-McCaffrey slates. Like, although I don't know if there were at even a handful of them, but
right.
I think 8,800 is still underpriced.
Wow. Okay.
That doesn't mean he's not expensive. He's obviously very expensive, but like I think he should be higher.
Are you going to try and find a way to get him in?
Yeah. I think the Adams build is based off of Carr and Jimmy G. It's like one of those. Right. Or three cheap cheap running backs for cash games, like, which always gets a little sketchy, but I think
I got plenty of cheap receivers coming, so I'm going to find you some gems so you can get Adams in if you need to.
Yeah, I think there are very viable builds that have him. It's as simple as that.
And it's one of those things, like if he's going to get that many targets from a all-pro Hall of Fame quarterback, like that matters. I mean, we'll talk about guys lower that get a lot of targets from bad quarterbacks, but if Aaron Rodgers is staring you down for 4 quarters, like that really matters.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the number of people who have lost so much money trying to get other receivers from the Packers to give them any sort of value.
For a couple of years now, too.
Yeah.
It's not just a this year thing. Like, it's been, who's the second receiver for the Packers for a while, and, Randall Cobb was there for a long time, but trying to find that number 2 that's going to get a lot of targets has been a thing, and there's nobody yet. I mean, Alan Lazard is practicing this week, but, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, there was another guy last year, I can't remember who it was. Maybe we'll go back to James Jones, but, like, we're going a long way back to find a second guy next to Adams.
Yeah, it's just not, I mean, for a quarterback that likes to throw and they're without their starting running back, I mean, it's the exact same thing as last week, except he's a little more expensive, but the matchup is actually better.
And I mean, he's more expensive than Kamara. He's more expensive than Derrick Henry. They've priced him up. You're right. It's not like not quite the Michael Thomas stuff from last year, but he's the most expensive. I think he's the most expensive guy in the whole slate.
Yeah, he is.
So if you drop down a little bit, you mentioned the guys in the mid-7s. There are some interesting names here. Metcalf is 7,500 on DraftKings, 7,800 FanDuel, 7,100 is Tyler Lockett. Obviously, Lockett was insane last week. 20 targets, which is nuts to say out loud. 15 for 203 touchdowns. I have been a huge Tyler Lockett fan for years. I just think he's really, really good. He had 9 targets the prior 2 games. So it's kind of one of those things like you kind of it just out of nowhere, but you can kind of figure out how Arizona, pretty much put Peterson on Metcalf and tried to move the offense away from that. I don't think the Niners can do that. I don't think they have a lockdown core that can stick with Metcalf. If I'm going with a stack this week, I'm going with Metcalf over Lockett, kind of flipping the script from last week.
Is it more just the lack, like if all things are equal, which we basically look at it now, then you side with Metcalf? Like last week they weren't equal because he was being shadowed, but
a little bit of that and a little bit of, Metcalf had 5 targets last week. I think they'll kind of, even that out a little bit. But mostly for me, I don't think the Niners can guard him on the outside, whereas I think they will with their linebackers and safeties. I think they'll be able to scheme a little bit towards the slot receiver, a little more what Lockett does. He'll be very involved, and they use him in the red zone too. But the only concern with Metcalf is, you have to get the big play because he has 4 catches. He's averaging exactly 4 catches per game. So it's not a huge PPR guy, but even with that, he has over 90 yards in 5 of 6 games. I just don't think the 49ers are built in the way that they can guard him deep on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, the benefit is that they're taking at least 1 or 2 shots. Of course.
Yeah, so they definitely will. In this game, I think they certainly will. Without Richard Sherman there to kind of maybe they could shadow him, although they usually don't. Niners have only allowed 1 wide receiver over 100 yards, so even with all the injuries, they have found a way to piece it together. They've faced some really crappy quarterbacks, though, to be fair. I don't know. I think it's a Metcalf week. I know it's kind of hard to figure out with these guys, but I think the way the Niners are built, I think Metcalf is going to eat against them pretty well.
That's fair. Does the going back to Adams for a second, does the weather worry you about him?
Yeah, I mean, one of those things I'll check Sunday morning. But yeah, if it's super windy, it does a little bit. Although he doesn't, I think they run so many like crossing patterns with him, and Rodgers can throw the ball so well. I don't think I wouldn't worry about Rodgers as much as I would the other 5 quarterbacks in those 3 games, put it that way, just because I think he can slice it through that pretty well. And a lot of the patterns they run for Adams, I think they can run anyway in the wind. But yeah, I think a little bit. We were paying $8,800 for somebody. You don't want that. You don't want any kind of factor to happen like that.
True. That's fair.
Anybody else in the 7,000s you like? We have Adam Thielen. We have Allen Robinson, who's questionable. For me, as I looked at it, Metcalf and Lockett were clearly the plays in the 7,000s over Thielen and Robinson. But I wanted to ask you if you like either of those guys at all.
The problem with Thielen is that if you're going to game stack, like that's just a very expensive game stack. Like Rodgers, Adams, Thielen is like you're going to need a lot of savings. Although it sounds like you've got a few guys down below that might make that work. But
you'll probably hate them all, but I got a lot of them. I got more than usual, which is hard for me to do. Thielen was really big against Green Bay week 1, but we talked about it a couple times. Like it was all fourth quarter. He did nothing the first 3 quarters and then kind of went off. He's the only wide receiver over 100 yards on Green Bay, believe it or not. I think that they'll probably move Thielen around and try get Jair Alexander off of him, and Alexander probably switch back and forth between Thielen and Jefferson. He's one of the top 3 corners in the NFL right now. Yeah. Thielen's active. He wasn't great last week. He was 351 against they had a bye last week, but the week before, 23 targets 2 weeks prior. I think you could argue Thielen. I just think that Metcalf and Lockett in that game make a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. And pretty much everybody below them. Like I'm not sure. Like AJ Brown, I guess makes sense, although he's just like not. I wish he's been getting a decent number of targets. He's basically between like 8 and 10, 7 and 10 every week, but. It just doesn't feel like enough, and he's only, a few hundred cheaper than Lockett that I probably don't end up there, or he's not even, what is that, 600 on DraftKings from Metcalf, so I would probably just end up there anyway. But he's the one that kind of you see AJ Brown, you're like, oh, he is really good, but I'm just not. I don't know. I wish he was a 12 target guy.
Yeah, and I wish that was the game script's not great in that game. We mentioned Tannehill probably to do stuff early, but I think AJ Brown is really, really talented also and really good and fun. But you're probably gonna have to need to get it early because I think they probably run the ball in the second half a bunch. Stephon Diggs or Tyreek Hill at all this week?
I mean the Jets secondary is horrific, so Hill. Hill makes a ton of sense.
Still doesn't have 100 yards in a game.
I know. Yeah. I mean, he's another one that I don't think I've ever played Tyreek Hill in a cash game just because you just never know when he's going to break it off.
It's funny you joke about I told you it's going to happen this week. That's going to be Tyreek Hill this year. He's going to have a 150-yard 2-touchdown game. Everyone's going to be like, I told you this is the week finally to play him, but it's been 5 weeks of that already. So yeah, I don't want to hear about it, but I moved off Hill a little bit last week. I liked him and Mahomes last week. Once the snow and all that came out and the total went down, I kind of moved away from those guys. I played them in one small GBP and that was it. I don't think I want to pay up for Hill in a week that I don't think they're going to throw the ball in the second half. Like, he can blow up and explode at any point, and I fully get that. But if I'm going to play Tyreek Hill in a game, I want to be against someone that at least I think they can kind of come back on Casey a little bit.
Yeah, I like the idea of Diggs. It sounds like Gilmore is not going to play, or at least he hasn't been practicing this week.
That's big, yeah.
That's big. Diggs gets the targets I wish Hill did. So I think Diggs is a solid play. I wouldn't play him in cash because there's one guy a little further down that I love this week, but I get Diggs.
There's a massive underprice we're about to get to. It's I don't know.
Speaking of targets,
they missed him by $1,000, and I don't know how. But before we get there, a couple guys in the mid sixes: Kenny Golladay 6,600, Justin Jefferson 6,500, Tyler Boyd 6,600 too. Any interest in these three guys? Kenny Galladay's been really good.
Yeah.
And he had 6 catches last week, and all of them were like acrobatic, really tough catches. Like, none of those were easy. He's really, really good.
Yeah. You kind of wish that he could make those catches and get the easy ones.
That's the funny part. Like, Stafford, like, give us a quick couple of easy ones too, right? Like, you suddenly make that 9 catches and 3 of them are easy, but with it's the Lions, nothing's ever easy.
Yeah, I think they're fine. Boyd, will get when Burrow's throwing 85 times, then Boyd is going to get his targets. But I think there is still one guy who's much better than all of them.
So that's Keenan Allen at 6,200. I was scrolling for Keenan Allen. I just don't I don't know. They just mispriced him. Like, there's no other way to do it. We had a couple of those this year, and they've worked pretty well. He should not be 6,200 flat out. He was 10 for 125 on 13 targets last week. Since Herbert's been playing, he has doubled his targets in every game except for that one where he left early, and he still scored in that game before he left, like in the first quarter too. Denver hasn't allowed any huge games, but Crowder and Jeff Smith had over 80 yards on the movie before. Tyreek scored last week. I just don't think that matters. The price, 6,200. I think Keenan Allen's like the biggest lock play of the week, and I hate to even say that because it won't work out well, but he's going to be high percentage. I'm not breaking any news here at all, but I just think they flat out mispriced Keenan Allen this week.
Yeah, he Jerry wrote about him as his point per dollar value, along with Kareem Hunt, but he noted he's averaging 13 and a quarter targets per game with Herbert.
And in a PPR system like DraftKings, 6,200 just makes no sense.
Yep. I think
I'd play him at 7,000. Put it that way.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I think he's gonna be in a lot of lineups. I don't think we're like I said, we're not breaking any news there, right. But that doesn't mean you can't play him. I just think with those are my targets, I think he's a really good play.
Totally agree.
Any interest in anybody else in here in the sixes? Cooper Kupp at Miami, I kind of like as a sneaky. Nobody's going to play him this week. The targets are still good. Robert Woods has kind of disappeared. He has under 30 yards the last 2 weeks. I think that in a drafting setup where you do get a full point PPR, I think that Kupp is playable this week. It's hard to play him over Jefferson and Golladay. He's at the same price as those guys, but if you want to be a little different in a GPP, I think Kupp makes some sense.
Yeah, that's how I would put it. He makes sense, I guess.
What about the Pittsburgh guys? We've got Juju finally woke up. I think that all my ripping on him finally awakened the beast. 9 for 85 on 14 targets. He had 14 targets. Deontay Johnson had 15 targets. Chase Claypool had 1. It was the weirdest, oh, here we go. Finally, Chase Claypool is clearly the third guy. They are similar price week. Juju's 5,400. Deontay's 5,500. I don't think it'd be a shock to anybody. Deontay for me all day over Juju. I just think that in the games he's played, he's clearly been their guy. He had 2 touchdowns last week. The problem is they're facing Baltimore. They've only allowed 1 wide receiver 100 yards all year, only 3 wide receiver touchdowns all year. It's a very tough matchup, but at the price, I think Deontay's still a pretty good play at 5,500. He's not the 4,200 he was last week, which is an absurd price, but still playable 5,500 in my mind.
Yeah, I don't. That fits in. I don't see a reason to play guys against Baltimore. Yeah.
I think that's fair too. And it's not like Ben's been lighting the world on fire where you got to play him. It could get back and forth if Lamar gets hot, but this is a game that I don't think I'm going to shoot for a lot of targets in this game.
Right.
One other guy in the 5,000s before we drop down in the 4s, Brennan Ayuk. 49ers, we talked about how we think that Jimmy's got to throw the ball a little bit this week. 5,800 on DraftKings. They did price him up with no Deebo Samuel. It surprised me a little bit. I thought it was going to be maybe 52, 5,300. Clearly the wide receiver 1. Seattle defense has been brutal. We went through it last week, so I won't list out every wide receiver that's gone crazy against the Seahawks because the list is really long now. But they've allowed 8 100-yard wide receiver games, which is an absurd amount. Hopkins was really good last week. Christian Kirk scored twice. They just kept getting burned all year. Ayuk was 6 for 115 last week on 7 targets. He's a guy that can catch an 8-yard pass and go for 50 at any point. I I think he's really playable. He's a little bit higher price than I was hoping for, but I think maybe that helps the percentage owned too. If he was like 4,900, everybody would have him, and I think maybe that helps a little bit in that regard.
I don't want to skip down too far, but that's not the 49ers wide receiver I wanted to talk about.
Well, I have that one down here too in the cheap ones, so that's a good point. I think Ayuk is way better than that other guy, but I think if you want to get a piece of this game, and I don't think the percentage will be high just because of his price. I think he could be. I think Ayuk is an interesting play and a guy that's really showed a lot so far this year. Two guys in the 4,000s before I get to the 3,000 guys, which I have a bunch of. Nelson Aguilar is back in our lives. 4,700 on DraftKings. He had 9 targets last week, 5 for $107. He scored in 3 straight weeks. Could be a back and forth game. We've kind of mentioned when we talked about that earlier. If you play Carr as Aguilar, who are you going to stack him with?
If I have Carr, I play Waller before I play.
All right, and I think that's a fair point. Waller's not priced super high; he's like 5,600. I think that is kind of where I felt in my Carr builds too. Is I'm just going to go up to Waller because I can save a little bit on Carr, but Aguilar's been good somehow.
Yeah, he's fine.
How many times can we let ourselves get burned by Nelson Aguilar, though? Right?
I mean, me never again. Like he'll burn me because I don't have him, and I don't think it's gonna he's gonna be popular enough where it really hurts me that much in cash games. The one guy that is in this range that I had zero thought of playing, but this situation is what works out. So 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Jaguars Lions, Jerry wrote up Keelan Cole because guys in the slot just murder the Lions. And I was like, you can't play Keelan Cole in a cash lineup.
Right.
I got smoked that week because I ended up playing Chenault for no reason. It was just dumb. But Zach Pascal is in the slot this week for the Colts against the Lions at 4,500. It's one of those, if you're willing to play a very good matchup with a guy that nobody should be thinking about, I would probably play that before I play Nelson Aguilar.
How much is Pascal?
4,500.
So I remember I looked that up and I didn't like it because of the price. There's another indie receiver I actually like more. And on another side, I appreciate not bringing up T.Y. Hilton because that would just hurt my soul, and I'm totally done. I'm done with that.
I mean, if I told you, weeks ago that you could get T.Y. Hilton against the Lions at 4,900, you'd be like, yeah. And now we're not even talking about it. Did
Phillip Rivers and all the backup quarterbacks die and something in the same thing?
Right.
Why? It makes no sense. But we talked about the Cincinnati game that was 2 weeks ago. I mean, I liked him as kind of a GPP guy at the price, and he had a touchdown called back. He had a 25-yard catch called back. At 4,900, there's enough guys cheaper that I don't think I'm going to go there. I don't know. He's got to do it. He's got to do it for once now. I'm back off, and it might burn me now, but. There's actually a Colts receiver cheaper that I like more.
I was going to say, I guess if you're going to take a random Colts receiver, you take the one that's 3,000. All right, I get it.
That's where we're going to go. Last guy in the 4,000s, though, Rashard Higgins. Another guy in this Cleveland-Las Vegas game. Higgins is 4,200. He was really good after OBJ went out last week. I know Donovan Peoples-Jones had the winning touchdown catch, but Higgins was 6 for 110 on 6 targets. Also scored in week 5 and 6. So he wasn't used a lot, but he did score in those weeks. Jarvis Landry is not a deep guy. He's kind of dragging himself around right now. He's probably be effective for them in a PPR setup, but Higgins at 4,200 I think is very, very playable this week. If we check that wind and the weather and it looks all right in a game that I think can go back and forth if the weather's good. He's a guy that I probably get a piece of, a cheap piece of this game.
That's not who I thought you were going to say.
Oh, who do you think I was going to say?
There's another guy in this range who has over 80 yards in back-to-back games and 24 targets in that span, and he's 4,500.
Who you got?
AJ Green.
Oh, God. I don't get how he's suddenly been good. I mean, he had 13 targets last week.
Because when you have a quarterback who throws 60 times a game, eventually they're going to get to Green.
Forces the crap out of it to him, too.
It's perfect. 8 for 82, or excuse me, 8 for 96 and 7 for 82 in back-to-back games. He's 4,500 in a game we're expecting them to throw in.
Yep. I actually think it's a really good play. It hurts me to say it, but 24 targets last game, like you mentioned, both over 80 yards. They seem like the last couple weeks they figured out how to use him differently. Like they were using him like old AJ Green early in the year, and it was looking terrible, and he looked bad. The plays were forced. I think they're using him in a better way and kind of using T Higgins in the way that maybe it used to use AJ Green. At 4,500, he makes a lot of sense. I can't dislike that play.
Yeah, I mean, it's just too many targets. Like
it is.
Like too many to ignore, and so trying to pull it up here. We have a page on RotoWire called Team Trends where you can get targets each week. But like last week, Boyd and Green both had 13. T. Higgins had 5. And the week before, Green had 11, Boyd 8, Higgins 8. Like Green, the last few games, I mean, he obviously had some issues in the middle, but like 9 targets in week 1, 13 in week 2, 11 last week or 2 weeks ago, and 13 this week for 4,500 in a game where the quarterback should throw 40 times. I don't care. Does it matter if he's bad?
I don't think it does. If he's going to go 7 for 85, like who cares at 4,500, right?
Right. And it's like he has a good quarterback too. It's not like he's getting passes from Phillip Rivers or something.
Yep. And a guy who's going to drop back 50 times and chuck it. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think now that you say that, it's hard. I definitely play him over Aguilar for sure.
Somebody made I saw it somewhere about using an optimizer without names. And like if you just had like, just blank them out. And I'm like, AJ Green would burst out of an optimizer at that price.
24 targets at 4,500. That enough right there is, fully agree. So let's jump into the 3,000 guys. I've got, I actually have 5 names down here that I think are interesting. And I never have that many names.
Love it.
And your shirt is one of them, so it's going to work well.
Oh, no.
Definitely the 5th on this list for me is KJ Hamler. I'm not going to play him, but 3,600 I think is interesting if Tim Patrick doesn't play. He didn't practice on Thursday.
Yeah.
Hamler came back last week, played 30 snaps, had a rush, and had 3 targets. So I think he's a guy that's super talented. I don't think I can do it against the Chargers and with Drew Lock. If this is a week where I didn't like anybody else down here, I'd probably do it. But there's enough guys right above him and enough guys actually below him that I don't think I'll do it, but I think he's worth mentioning.
Okay.
You mentioned the 49ers. Kendrick Bourne is who you were talking about down here at 3,500. He becomes the wide receiver 2 with Debo out. Seattle, like we said, mentioned 8 guys over 100 yards. He had 22 targets the first 4 weeks when Debo was not playing very much or didn't play and then was limited. I think the targets will be there. I don't think Kendrick Bourne's good. I think he drops a lot of passes, which drives me freaking nuts. I'm not going to play him because I like other guys more here, but it makes a lot of sense in this game setup.
I think the important thing to remember about Bourne is that he may be the 2nd wide receiver, but he's at best the 3rd receiving option.
That's a good point.
So
yes, because Kittle obviously jumps ahead of everybody.
Right.
But they like him in the red zone. They get inside there and they tend to throw to him. I don't know why, because he freaking drops everything. But he actually is one of those guys, like he makes the really tough catches and then the really easy ones he drops. It makes no sense. He's frustrating. But in a game that has the highest total on the slate right now, in a game the 49ers are going to have to throw a little bit. I know that Shanahan's going to want to take the air of the ball, but second half, if they're down or Wilson's going back and forth, you have to throw it. I think that I think Bourne's going to get at least like 6-7 targets, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
He just has to catch them.
He just has to catch them. Some other guys down here I like more. The first guy is in Chicago. Darnell Mooney. Mooney. 3,500 on DraftKings. He becomes, I think he's playable with Allen Robinson, but if Allen Robinson doesn't play and he hasn't practiced yet this week with a concussion protocol, Mooney's targets the last 4 weeks, 9, 5, 5, and 7, really active already. He's getting some deep looks too. I watched that game against the Rams because it was Monday night and it's Monday Night Football. I had to watch it. He had some deep looks they just missed on. Nick Foles did not play well in that game, but you got to figure if they keep taking those deep looks, going to hit some. He hasn't topped 60 yards yet, but in a game where they're going to have to score against the Saints to kind of stick in it, another game that the win's going to be a factor. We'll have to think about that. But 3,500, a guy that I think could explode. I think he's a little bit more of a GPP guy than a cash guy for me, but I think he's really interesting at the price.
I love Mooney. Like I think he's one of those guys that we want to play every week, but we have to be like, but Foles is just, he keeps missing him and stuff like that. Like Mooney's going to have a huge game at some point.
He's going to. Yeah.
Thankfully, he's cheap enough where you can kind of take the risk a little bit. It's not like you're taking a risk at a $6,500 player. So yeah, I like Mooney a lot.
Yeah, because Foles was terrible last week, and Mooney still had 3 for 40 is not what you want when you play him, but at this price, it's not going to destroy you. And I just think the potential for a really big game, like you said, is right there.
Yeah, that's exactly how it feels. Just Like the worst part is that he's open and getting missed, and it's not like he.
If I had him last week, it would have been so frustrating to watch that game because there was a couple plays where it was just horrible passes by Foles. It was just like right there. It could have been really big. But for our purposes this week, that's a really good thing. We saw that happened. The stats weren't there. The price didn't go up, or he may have gone up a little bit. It was only 3,500. He was 3,000 last week, so we went up 500. But still very, very playable.
Yeah, I mean he's got a 15.2 ADOT, which like the guys in that like Calvin Ridley's 15.4. Gallup is at like 16, like that. He's running like the routes that you want to take a chance on.
Do you have the ADOT up on your screen?
I do.
Is Jefferson still like 19?
Justin?
Yeah.
12.6.
Oh, I thought he was way higher than that. All right, that's not as much as I thought. Denzel Mims with your shirt on right there.
That's actually not who I thought you were going to say.
Oh, really? 32. You thought I was going Jeff Smith?
No, I thought you were going to go Braxton Berrios, actually.
Oh. Mims for me this week, but the problem is now is like, everybody's talking about him on Twitter, which drives me nuts. Jamison Crowder is, quote, trending down. Brett Perriman's been ruled out. Mims is their second-round pick, played his first game against Buffalo on Sunday. He had 7 targets last week. Like, they dropped him in, and he was very active. He was 4 for 42. The game script is like just heaven for a wide receiver. Like they're gonna be trailing this entire game and dropping back and throwing all freaking game. They're 20-point underdogs. I think Denzel Mims at 3,200 in a PPR setup is a really, really good play. It scares me on the Jets. It scares me that everybody's just talking about Mims season on Twitter, which, by the way, season is SZN is like my pet peeve. I hate it more than anything else on Twitter. I hate it. I hate it so much. Sorry if you use it. I think at 3,200, I think he's a really, really good play this week, and a guy that's going to be in my lineups. I think he's going to be a little too highly owned probably, but with 7 targets last week, both starters out, I think he's a really good play.
Yeah, I mean, I got like really excited about when they took him, when they drafted him, because like the Jets haven't had like a 6'2", 210-pound wide receiver in a while. Do you play him as a one-off, or do you try to play him in a Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill? Like, how do you play him? Because
at the price, I play him as a one-off.
Yeah, because there's just like there's too much of a concern that the Chiefs can score any which way. And
right.
Okay.
I think he's very, very playable as a one-off. I don't think it needs to be a run back at all.
That's fair. I hope he's amazing.
I mean, even if you give me the same targets as last week, I play him every single time at 3,200. And I think the targets, if anything, have to go up. Another week of practice, another week with Darnold, Crowder, and Perriman gone. I mean, Perriman played last week, so that was big. He got smoked last week. That was a scary hit. I just think if you give me this targets and a guy that obviously is talented, obviously is really athletic, I got to take it at 3,200. I don't think it'll be 3,200 next week. Let's put it that way.
Do you think he's better than Bourne?
Yes.
Okay.
As like a human being or a player or a DFS player or what? I think he's a better receiver. I think he's in a better situation.
Okay.
Last guy in this range, we kind of teased a little bit, Indianapolis. Marcus Johnson at 3,000 for Indy at Detroit. He had a big game last week against last time they played against Cincinnati. He was 5 for 108 on 8 targets. The game before, he was 353. He clearly is their big play guy right now. I watched way too much of that game 2 weeks ago because I had T.Y. Hilton everywhere. It was so frustrating to watch. But every time they went deep, I'm like, oh, there's T.Y. And it was like, oh, it's Marcus Johnson. Like, Phillip Rivers obviously likes taking shots to him. Minimum price, I would play him over Pascal and Hilton for sure in this offense. I was looking to play someone cheap in this game, and I like the game indoors. We don't have a lot of indoors games. It might be maybe one of only 2 this week that's indoors. My only problem with Johnson is that I like Mims and Mooney a lot too, so it's hard for me to play him over Mims. But at 3,000, I'm shocked he's still min price after the game last week. I guess the bye week in there kind of made everybody forget about him. But I think Marcus Johnson's a really nice big play guy in a PPR at 3,000.
That's fun. Yeah, I think that's a good call. There's one other guy here that I wanted to bring up.
Hit me with it.
He's got a touchdown in back-to-back games. He had 8 targets in his last game, 13 in his last 2. Does that interest you at all?
It does. I'm trying to figure out who that is, though.
It's Josh Reynolds.
I played him in the showdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. I was shocked how much Goff looked at Reynolds in that game. Like, he has Woods and Kupp, and every time they went deep or like anything, it was just Reynolds. Every time I looked at, it was number 11 catching the ball. I was like, Goff really likes him, which is obviously really important.
Yeah, what was funny was I wrote about him because like Kupp and Woods basically run like the same types of routes, like it's like all very short and like quick passes, and Reynolds is the deeper guy, and of course he scores a 4-yard touchdown, and I'm like, okay, well, whatever, but like they're favored in Miami in a game that theoretically, I mean, there's no establishing the run with the Rams, like they're going to throw, and so
he was 4,100 2 weeks ago at the 49ers. Scored in his last 2 games. Now he's 3,100.
Yeah,
that's odd.
And they're still they're favored in the game, and
yeah. And I think that it's hard to know what Miami's going to do. Like if it was Fitzpatrick, I'd be like, I think Miami can score enough to make this a game. I have no idea what to expect from Tua. I'm not playing Tua, that's for sure. I don't think you do it against the Rams, but I mean, he's obviously comes with the biggest college pedigree and stats and efficiency that we've ever seen. Like his YPA and completion percentage is like more than like the best prospect coming out of college ever, pretty much.
Yeah.
But I don't think I can do it against the Rams. But I don't know what to expect there. Reynolds is interesting, and I think with the names we mentioned, I think Mims and Mooney will be way more popular. I think you get Reynolds for like no ownership this week.
Yeah, just in terms of like implied points, like the Rams have more implied points than the Raiders, the Chargers. They're basically right behind the Ravens and the Niners. Like it's not like they're not going to score any points, and so
of course,
yeah, why not?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I like that. It's a really good call, and one that I think with the other names in here will fly under the radar pretty well. Especially Bourne, you can put Bourne in there too, because I think a lot of people will go to Bourne in that game too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot. You're right. There were a lot of guys. You said that before we started. You said you had a ton of them, and now I don't know if I want to play.
I know, me too.
Yeah.
You got to play Mims. You got the Jets shirt on. You're a fan. It's time.
I gotta play Mims. Oh,
gotta play Mims.
That's the great thing. I'm wearing the shirt. And I have to play the Jets in a game. They're 19.5-point underdogs. And I don't think they
can. That's like a college line. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Let's jump into tight ends real quick. We've gone a little bit long on the other stuff here, as we often do. Hopefully people like the info. We've got at the top of the tight ends, we have Kittle and Kelsey. Again, another week where it's always hard for me to find this amount of money to play tight ends. But if I were going to play one, it would be Kittle for me this week. If Jamal Adams plays, that might impact that a little bit. But I just think Seattle's defense in general is so bad. The Niners are going to have to score a little bit. We talked about how Shanahan will try and run the clock, but they're going to have to score a little bit. Wide receivers smoke them. I consider Kittle a wide receiver 1 in this team anyway, like you mentioned earlier. I would go Kittle for $400 more than Kelsey, $200 cheaper on FanDuel. I go Kittle over Kelsey this week for me.
I agree, but like Waller is so much better at the price. I mean, he's not cheap either.
$1,400 less than Kittle, though, in a game that I've mentioned before. I like going back and forth a little bit. I mean, Waller's been aside. You take out that New England game where Belichick was pretty much like, Waller, you're not going to beat me. Anybody else can. He has over 10 PPR points in all those games. His targets last week are 12, 7, and 9. Good game flow here. I would have no issue with Waller at 5,600 this week.
Yeah, I like him a lot, and because we like Kittle, and because Kelsey's got a great matchup against this terrible Jets defense, and because we like Waller, it's definitely the Mark Andrews 3-touchdown day.
Oh, man, Mark Andrews. It's got to be. He hasn't have 60 yards in the game yet.
Yeah, you don't need it. Four catches for 38 yards and 3 touchdowns.
He has 5 touchdowns already. I am not playing Mark Andrews this week, so I'll get that out there. You can play that as like the video clip when he scores 3 times and make me look bad, but I'm planting my flag in that. I will not have Mark Andrews this week. I like Waller a lot more.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I had trouble with kind of the 4,000 range. There's a couple really cheap guys I want to ask you about in a second, but in like the 4,000 range, I had trouble finding anybody. We've talked about Hunter Henry a bunch. He was really bad last week, and he's kind of like it was like this. It was like he was solid. He's kind of falling off. I don't know if it's Herbert, throwing to the other guys there, and
he still had 7 targets.
He had 15 targets the last 2 weeks, but it was like 3 for 20. He's just not doing anything with them.
Nothing.
It's weird. His price has dropped off. He's down to 4,200. So I think the price he's playable again for the targets, but got to admit he's been disappointing the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. There's nothing about Hunter Henry that makes me think like, let me just play him one more time.
Right.
Like I'm good.
It's just the targets with a good quarterback, but I might end up with him just because I have to price down a little bit, but I'm not as excited about it as I was like 2-3 weeks ago at the price.
Yeah. There are guys below him that I'm more than comfortable with. So.
Is there anybody else in this range you like? Jonnu Smith, Noah Fant, Hawkinson's more expensive. Anybody else that you like here? Because I couldn't find anybody I really liked in the 4,000s.
No, I mean, I feel like I say it every week. Like Fant is the one who's most likely to have a big play, but they're so rare that it's not enough for me to play him this week.
Tell me who you like in the cheaper range then.
I mean, they're all pretty awful, realistically, but
really, I just want to make you say the person's last name.
Oh,
we got someone different. Go ahead, go with yours then. I'll break mine down.
I was just initially going to bring up Gerald Everett because it sounds like Higbee might not play, or at least he's questionable to play. So I like Everett. I was actually going to bring up Harrison Bryant again. Like five targets last week.
Yeah. People scored with him last week too.
Like big time. He's only 3,200, which it was funny to see because when Hooper was ruled out, everyone was like, "Oh, let's play David Njoku," and Njoku. I mean, he did score as well.
He did score, yeah.
But he only had 3 targets. Not that Harrison Bryant's 5 was all that much, but when he was like, I think he was a stone minimum last week.
I actually know some Browns fans. They actually think Harrison Bryant might be a pretty good player.
Might like actually be good. Oh.
Yeah, not like a good situation, but actually a pretty good player too.
Oh, okay.
3,200, I think, is in a game that like we talked about many times. They can be back and forth. I think he's still really playable this week.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know who you're referring to.
Albert Okwuegbunam.
Oh, there he is.
For the Broncos against the Chargers, 2,800 on DraftKings. Even with Noah Fant in last week, he had 7 targets, 7 catches for 60 yards. The week before, he had 6 targets. He has 13 targets the last 2 weeks at 2,800 in a game that you think that they're going to be trailing. It seems like they've been going to him. They had a couple red zone looks 2 weeks ago. He went to Missouri, I think. I think I owned him in my college fantasy league a couple years ago. He's a pretty good tight end. I think he went to Missouri. I could be wrong on that, but someone I'm sure is correcting me as we speak here. But I don't know. You're gonna give me that number of targets. Potentially, he's a big guy, 6'5", 220, 255. He did go to Missouri, by the way. I was right on that. A big guy, red zone target with that many targets the last 2 weeks at 2,800. I'm kind of interested in playing that this week.
4.4940.
Yeah, he's an athlete.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I get
line
it.
Him up wide receiver. Tim Patrick's probably not going to play.
Yeah.
Which I think is a pretty big factor in that offense. So you could play. I'm going to call him Albert O. You can play Albert O and Fant at the same time if you're the Broncos. With Judy and whoever else they want to throw out there. KJ Hamler, I suppose. But I think that Patrick has got to be out for it to work. But I think if he is. Albert O suddenly becomes kind of that red zone guy that they can use. 6'5", 255 that runs fast. Like that's a weapon right there.
13 targets on 35 routes.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
They're looking at him. He's been involved. I like it. If I'm going to go cheap, it's hard to take him over Harrison Bryant because Harrison Bryant had 5 targets last week and scored twice, but I think I'm going to do it.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, 2,800 is super
2,800. Cheap. Yeah, 2,800. You need 2 catches pretty much.
Right. If he scores, it's a huge boon. I mean, it's I don't know. I think it could work. Obviously, plays down here at 2,900 are always risky, and he was not even part of the offense until the last 2 weeks. He didn't even play. He didn't play any snaps. I don't know if he was hurt or didn't play at all. But been really active. 13 targets the last 2 weeks. That means a lot to me at 2,800.
Looks like he had an ankle injury, but looks like the inactives were coach's decisions here. I thought for a second, just a quick second, you were going to talk about Chris Herndon.
I'm not.
Me neither.
No. I've fully moved on in my life from Chris Herndon. The offense is bad, and I think he's actually bad. Sorry. I was nice about the Jets earlier, so I had to get one shot.
Yeah, no, you're not even being mean. It's just realistic.
You still didn't give up a touchdown last week. Let's talk about defenses real quick. I think people will kind of gravitate towards the Chiefs defense against the Jets, but they're obviously pretty expensive. They're 4,500 on DraftKings, 5,000 on FanDuel. Hard to get away from it. They had 3 sacks and 4 turnovers forced last week against Denver. The Jets allowed 6 sacks last week and 18 over the last 4 weeks. So I mean, very playable, but obviously expensive. You're good with the cheaper defenses. Who do you like this week? Kind of saving a little bit of cash.
The one that came out to me at first was the Dolphins. I mean that game. I lost my page here of what the spread is in that game.
I think the Rams are favored by like 6.5.
No, I see a 3.5 on my.
Oh, is it that low? All right.
But it's a close game. Rams are
I
obviously.
I like the Rams then, by the way.
Yeah. Well. Oh yeah. For sure. Early body clock game for the Rams,
Right.
going all the way to Miami. Weird things happen, so I don't think that's such a bad play.
Yeah, Dolphins have 8 sacks the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They're off a bye, which is kind of nice. Jared Goff is someone that make a mistake now and then. I could see that happening. The Rams will give up a lot of sacks though, so it's might be a little bit tough. How much is Miami?
2,400.
Okay, so you're going. That's the kind of the dirt cheap savior.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you asked for cheap. I'm going to give you cheap.
Yeah, you like them more than the Lions?
At
2,500.
At 20, I mean, I get teams that play against Phillip Rivers, although the Lions, if I remember correctly, have just been horrific. Or maybe I just had them in the game; they had 0.
No, they're not. They're not great. They have 5 sacks
-3.
in the last 3 weeks. Like there's nothing really exciting there. It's just that Phillip Rivers tends to do some stupid stuff.
Well, yeah, no, I get that. I don't think Cleveland 2,600 is that bad. Home, if the game gets kind of sloppy, win wise, you never know. So that's something to look at. And then, I mean, the Bears 2,800 against New Orleans. Like the Bears are a very good defense, and the Saints offense is very limited in terms of like what they can actually do. Like there's nothing deep. And so if the Bears can basically pack it in.
I kind of want deep and some dangerous passes, though, with
right.
defense. Breeze just doesn't take any risks. I don't
None.
know. Yeah. So in the more mid-range, in that same game, I think the Saints at the Bears are interesting. I think they're going to be popular. I think they're going to be the most popular, highly owned defense this week. They're 3,400 on DraftKings. They're really cheap on FanDuel at 3,600 on FanDuel. They're like 1,000 less than the Bills and 700 less than the Chargers. I think they'd be really popular on FanDuel. I don't know why they're so cheap. Foles threw a couple picks last week, did not look good. He can obviously make a mistake. I think the Rams are interesting. I mean, to go against Tua, they have 4+ sacks in 3 of the last 4 games, facing a rookie quarterback in a nice game script. You mentioned the 3.5 point favorites. I think that's an interesting play too. And then I think the Bills. The Bills had 6 sacks last week. They're 3,300 on DraftKings going against New England. I mean, mentioned earlier, Cam just looked horrible. The Pats had 4 picks. Cam had 3 of them. The Pats have thrown multiple picks in 3 straight games now. I think that, if Cam goes out, going with Stidham or whoever else they want to use is not impressive either. I think the Bills are probably my favorite D here at 3,300. I wish New England maybe took a few more chances and shots, but I think that's probably the play for me. I think I moved to them in DraftKings away from the Saints because I think the Saints will be more popular.
It's funny. I was surprised when you said how much you like the Saints at 34 because the Bills at 33 seem like such an easy play against Cam. That's crazy that they're so different on FanDuel.
They're $900 more than the Saints on FanDuel, and they're $100 less than the Saints on DK.
Right. Yeah. No, I like those. I like that one a lot.
The only other place I'd go, and I think they're a little too expensive for me compared to the Bills and Saints, is the Chargers or the Broncos. I like this defense. They had 5 sacks last week against Jackson. I played them in a bunch of lineups. The Broncos turned it over 4 times last week, but they're 4,000. So that 700 you get right there. Usually I can find something else that I really want to do with that. So I probably won't get there. But in a lineup where maybe I have a few extra bucks, I might bump it up. But I'd probably just pay the Bills for $700 less.
What do you about 3,000 for the Titans against Burrow, knowing he's throwing 45 times?
Yeah, I mean that could work. You always want a game where a guy's going to drop back a bunch and throw it late. I think that's very playable too.
Okay, that's a lot we just said.
It did. I think I still probably go the Bills for $300 more though, just because I just can't believe how terrible Cam Newton looked.
Yeah,
he can't throw the ball. He can't throw the ball without using his whole body to throw it, and he can't throw it more than 15 yards. It's wild. I think he's fully washed.
Wow.
As a passer. He's still obviously super talented, good run, but I don't think he can be that one-dimensional in the NFL. Like the guys that run and pass, like Kyler Murray and Wilson, those guys have such a threat of passing the ball. Lamar, I don't think Cam has a threat of throwing the ball at all. I mean, the Niners were banged up last week, and there was never a point in that game after the first quarter where I thought the Patriots had a chance to move the ball.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law was she was watching the game over at the house, and it was I think it was 27-6 or whatever it was, and she's worried about a referee call, and I'm like, the game's over. I'm like, this game is, and I never say that for 49ers games. People texting me during the Super Bowl last year. I just turned my phone off because they were so annoying when they had the lead. But that game was so over because the Patriots had no chance to move the ball. I've never seen the Patriots look that inept. It was, and the Niners could just run the ball too. But the offense was so bad.
I love it. Just love it.
Yeah, I'm sure it breaks your heart. And no Edelman this week. They have no catch the ball. I guess Burke had, and they went away from James White, which is weird. But I mean, James White's probably the best receiver right now. It's gross.
Aw, bummer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad. But then again, Tom Brady's throwing like 4 touchdowns a game and looks like he's 24 instead of 44.
No.
Anybody else you want to talk about? We kind of hit a lot and we went a little bit long here, but there's kind of a fun slate to break down. There's a lot of playable guys at different ranges, especially at wide receiver this week.
No, I think we're good. I think that should be the motto of the podcast, though. Sorry, we went a little long.
Yeah, well, yeah, people are paying so much for the podcast. I think they can deal with a little bit of us talking a little bit long. But
that's right.
Anyway, more than anything, thank you for everybody for listening. We really appreciate that. If you could please rate or read the podcast, it'd be fantastic. Also, you want to follow Andrew on Twitter. He is at RotoWire Andrew. I am at Scott Jenstad. Thanks everybody for listening. I'll be back at you next Friday with Week 9. Hope everybody has a great Week 8 and take care.